Hi folks, thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of guns. So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com, that's gunsetc.com, and if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Welcome back and happy April 27th. Bill Bennett and I wrote a piece that will be up on Fox News tomorrow morning. A forgotten principle of public policy reform. Focus on failure and you will get failure. Focus on success and you will get success. Looking at the past 2 months of our state responses to the coronavirus, it's time to revive that idea. There's one state in America that has a larger elderly population than New York, that is more ethnically diverse than New York, and that has 2 million more people than New York. Yet its death rate from COVID-19 is 5% that of New York. That state is Florida. The tale of these two states, New York and Florida, illustrate that perhaps the media should have been less adulatory of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and given Florida Governor Ron DeSantis more attention. Instead, the facts and statistics reveal the media got this backward. In March, Florida was projected to be the second worst state for COVID-19 deaths, with predictions of 174 deaths per day and a total of nearly 7,000 deaths by the end of the summer. Nothing like this has transpired, and it will not come to pass. Meanwhile, Governor Andrew Cuomo's daily press briefings have been covered in full, and he has been lauded as everything from, quote, the golden governor to, quote, the politician of the moment. Governor DeSantis, however, receives headlines such as, quote, Florida governor issues coronavirus stay-at-home order after heavy criticism, and, quote, Florida governor keeps hitting new lows in the battle against coronavirus, close quote. Yet while New York kept chalking up bigger and bigger infection rates and deaths, Florida contained its problems early and without the heavy hand so many urged on it. While one might be tempted to point out the ways in which New York and Florida are different, and there are differences, a few things of a comparative nature are not well understood. As is well documented, the most vulnerable population for the coronavirus is the 65-plus age group. Only one state has a higher percentage of elder Americans living in it than Florida. That's Maine. In Florida, that population constitutes over 20% of the state. In New York, it's just over 16%. Florida is also more ethnically diverse than New York. While 17% of Florida's population is African American and New York's is just under 18%, Florida's Hispanic population is 26% to New York's 19%. Florida is also much more populous than New York, with, as I say, about 2 million more residents. But Florida has done well with the coronavirus, as the media is quiet to report, while New York has not. Of the 55,000-plus COVID-19 deaths in America, New York, with over 22,000 of those, is responsible for over 40%, while Florida, with nearly 1,100 of them, is responsible for just under 2% of the nation's fatalities. Yet Florida shut down its state much later than New York, almost 2 weeks later, to much criticism for its delay. And the shutdown in Florida was also much less severe than New York's. Florida did not close down churches and synagogues, nor did it order the shuttering of most of its beaches. What Florida's Ron DeSantis did do was take a much more vertical approach to the virus than others, like New York's Andrew Cuomo. In early March, Governor DeSantis put out targeted and prevention messaging to his elder population, advising them to stay at home. In places like the Villages, home to over 125,000 retirees, DeSantis implemented golf cart drive-through coronavirus testing and deployed the National Guard to help institute testing in the state's nursing homes where, unlike New York, older COVID-19 patients were not sent. Early on, Governor DeSantis suspended visitation and ordered staff screening at long-term care facilities. He also dispatched millions of masks and gloves and hundreds of thousands of face shields and gowns, also known as personal protective equipment, to nursing homes and other centers caring for the elderly. These actions, among others, led Florida to a 93% better per capita long-term care facility death rate than New York. Florida's worst day was nearly 2 weeks ago, with 72 deaths, and its total deaths are 7 times less than predicted. Indeed, Florida has a 94% less the per capita COVID-19 death rate than New York. Still, Governor DeSantis was being criticized for being late in his shutdown. Wrong. It wasn't late. It was targeted to the vulnerable population and was less restrictive overall. Now, having been wrongly criticized for issuing orders so late in the coronavirus panic passion play, Governor DeSantis is working not on further clampdowns and shutdowns, but rather reopening as much of the state as possible. Perhaps more in the media can open their gaze and more fairly assess his administration's and state's actions and record now also. For Florida, Governor DeSantis was much more ready, and as Shakespeare says, readiness is all. So the questions naturally arise. How did so many fall for Cuomo rather than DeSantis's ethics? And what drove it? You've heard me on this before, and I'd love your thoughts, but basically mine are these 3. 1, to the left, everything always stinks. It's Barry Maguire ethics. We're always on the eve of destruction. Millions were to die from the population bomb in the 70s, millions more in the nuclear winter of the 1980s, global warming and the ecosystem destruction in the 1990s up until now was the vogue and has been the vogue of fright. Trump and Goldwater and Reagan weren't conservative. They were Nazis, Hitlers, fascists. Donald Trump, as Joe Biden puts it, is an existential threat to the Constitution. 2, we lost an ethic of things being more important than life. We started out here saying, give me liberty or give me death, pledging our sacred honor and lives for that, right? Later in the Civil War, the North marched singing, as he died to make men holy, we shall die to make men free. In the 50s and 60s, better dead than red was the call. Indeed, as recently as 1983, President Reagan was speaking of that and said as much in his Evil Empire speech, with the story about a man who said he'd rather his daughter die believing in God than live in a country that ripped God away from her. Every member of the military knows this. There's something more important than one's own life. It's their country. Michael Barone wrote that life in America was a contest between soft America and hard America. Ironically, soft America won. And finally, too many kids have needed safe spaces from things like ideas. Adam Carolla's testimony to Congress 3 years ago was prophetic. He said, we're talking a lot about the kids, and I think they're just that, kids. We're the adults, and I don't think that we're doing the children any kinds of favors. They grew up dipped in Purell playing soccer games where they never kept score and watching Wow Wow Wubsy, and we're asking them to be mature. We need the adults to start being the adults. Studies have shown that if you take people and put them in a zero-gravity environment like astronauts, they lose muscle mass. They lose bone density. We're taking these kids in the name of protection. We're putting them in a zero-gravity environment, and they are losing muscle mass and bone density. They need to live in a world that has gravity. You need to expose your children to germs and dirt and the environment to build up their immune systems. Our plan is to put them in the bubble, keep them away from everything, and somehow they'll come out stronger when they emerge from that bubble. And it's not happening. Eric Greitens put it this way, my best teachers used a lot of red ink, he wrote. To the extent I did some things well, it's because they pointed out the things I did wrong. Sure, it didn't always feel good, but they were right to correct me. They were right to worry about deepening my learning, more about deepening my learning than damaging my ego. There's wisdom in all that red ink. Our culture forgets this. It's a culture that out of concern will try to shield you. You'll get trophies for showing up. Your teachers will fret about giving you a bad grade. You'll get told not to read books because they contain a few bad words, and if you're not careful, you'll be encased in bubble wrap. Don't let that happen. Remember, a culture of banned books leads to a culture of brittle people, and if you avoid what might offend or bother you, you'll also miss out on things that will stretch and strengthen you. Discomfort is the warm-up act to growth. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.